Hey guys, it's Tori, and this week I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up. So I've been so excited to do my first wrap-up. This is one of my favorite videos to watch on BookTube, and I've just been so excited to do one. I just feel like it's a good place to discuss specifically what I love about the book and what I don't like about it, and really dig deep into my feelings when they're still pretty fresh. Also, side note, I'm sorry I didn't post a video last week. There was a problem with editing that hopefully I figured out by now. Anyway, let's get started. So I ended up reading a total of 5 books this month. The first book I read this month I actually read before the break, so I don't have the physical book with me, and that was Queens of Fennbirn by Kendare Blake. This book is a compilation of 2 novellas that take place in the world of the Three Dark Crowns series. Essentially, this series follows 3 sisters, and every generation there are a set of triplets born to the queen, and they are raised together for a short time, but eventually they are separated into their different based on their powers to different groups of people in the kingdom to be raised, and when they turn 16 it's basically a fight to the death, and whoever comes out on top becomes the next queen. It's a really interesting series. I didn't love the first one, but I liked it and was curious enough to pick up the second one. The second one I liked a lot better, and then I read these novellas, which are supposed to take place, well, you're supposed to read them between the second and third books. So I haven't picked up the third book yet, but essentially in these 2 novellas, the first novella follows the 3 sisters that we've been following, Catherine, Arsinoe, and Mirabella. We follow them as they go through their first 6 years of life where they were raised together by a nursemaid, and how they're separated once they turn 6, and some of their experiences after being separated before the events of book 1. So very interesting. I didn't love that one as much. I loved the second novella better, which actually takes place 500 years before the events in this series, and it follows a queen who was an oracle queen who is called Elsebet the Mad, even in the time period where our 3 queens are currently. And because of decisions she supposedly made, every time there's an oracle queen born among the triplets, they're automatically drowned as babies, just because people are terrified that what happened with Elsebet is going to happen again. So very interesting. So we end up following Elsebet's story and the events that actually took place, and I really enjoyed that one, and I'm excited. I know Elsebet plays a role in the third book, so I'm excited to see how that all goes down, what exactly happens. But I gave this novella collection, I guess, a 4 out of 5 stars. It was really enjoyable. Again, the first novella was very interesting. It was interesting to see it firsthand because we had kind of been told a little bit about what had happened in this novella, but it was interesting to experience it firsthand, and it helped me grasp some of the queens a little bit better, which was very nice. So loved it, and I'm excited to see how Elsebet plays a role in the next book. So after I came back to school, it was on January 7th that I came back to school, and I kind of had a 2-week reading hiatus. I just wasn't really feeling it. I was trying to figure out my classes, and so I just didn't really take the time to read. I started one book that I've had for a really long time, and I just wasn't feeling it, and I was going through that reading slump. And so if you didn't see my video a couple weeks ago, I went to a bookstore and was able to get a few new books, and one of them just really drew me in, and so I ended up just picking it up, and it got me back in the reading game, and that was Magic Hour by Kristin Hannah. This I gave 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good. It basically follows a psychiatrist named Julie who recently had a horrible tragedy occur to one of her patients, and because of it she's lost a lot of respect in the community. She's lost all her clients, and she's really distraught. She's not super close to her family. She only has one sister left. Her parents have both passed away, and her sister is currently serving as the sheriff in their small tiny town where they grew up. And one day, all of a sudden, this 6-year-old girl appears in the park in this small town, and she basically acts like a wild child. She doesn't speak, she climbs trees, she has a wolf cub that's her friend that's with her, and they have no idea where this girl came from. And so they end up calling in Julie, the psychiatrist, to come and figure out what's wrong with this little girl and try to help her find her family. And so she comes and ends up developing this sweet relationship with this little girl and developing a better relationship with her sister and other things as they're trying to figure out where this little girl came from. I really, really enjoyed this. If you don't know, Kristen Hanna wrote The Nightingale, which is a World War II historical fiction about 2 sisters in France. I haven't read it. I've heard it's really, really good. They're actually coming out with a movie of it this month, which is pretty exciting. This was the first one I've ever picked up by her, and like I said, I really, really enjoyed it. It just had a lot of heart in it. It was about developing relationships and understanding what's really important in life and learning to trust people, especially after tragedy strikes and people treat you not very nicely, just coming to learn to love again and trust again. And it was just really heartwarming, but also had creepy aspects, especially as you see this little girl react to different things and coming to see that something really tragic happened to this little girl. And I just absolutely adored this book. I will say, if you are more of a action plot driven type reader, this may not be the book for you. It's very much about figuring out this girl. There's a lot of psychiatric sections, so it's not really an action-packed story, but it is very interesting and also very eerie in a lot of ways. I will also say, if you're uncomfortable reading anything at all about things like abuse, kidnapping, rape, suicide, those sorts of things, maybe don't pick this up. It's not like explicitly described or like, in fact, like there's no like scenes with those things in it. It's just talked about throughout the book because of possibilities with what happened to the little girl and some things that happened with her Julie's patient in the very beginning that caused her job to go bust. It is mentioned, so if it really makes you uncomfortable reading anything about that, probably don't pick this up. But if it's one of those things that you can handle to an extent, this is really good and I definitely highly recommend it. So yes. So after that, I ended up getting in my reading game and I ended up picking up a book that I've been super nervous about picking up, and I'll explain why in a second, but that is This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. So Victoria Schwab is a very, very well beloved author amongst the booktube community, and last year I read her trilogy, A Darker Shade of Magic, and I enjoyed the world a lot. I enjoyed her writing, and I enjoyed a couple of her characters, but some of her characters really bothered me, and the plot itself was very underwhelming to me. And so I didn't love it as much as a lot of people did. I was underwhelmed with it. It wasn't like I hated it or disliked it in any way. It was just underwhelming. It was disappointing. And so going into this, I really have wanted to like Victoria Schwab because she's so well loved and I've wanted to give her a shot. Well, I've had this for a while and I decided to finally pick it up. Essentially, it follows this future world where the United States has fallen. It's like multiple colonies, and in one of these colonies or cities, I guess, these monsters have started to crop up, and they're very unique monsters. There's Corsai, which are basically like claws and teeth and will attack you at night. Malkai, who are basically sort of like vampires. They suck blood and are very pale and fast. And then there are the Sunai, who are able to steal people's souls by playing music. And we follow a girl who is not a monster and a boy who is a monster, and they're developing friendship throughout this novel. So I really liked this one. I definitely liked it and appreciated the plot better in this one than I did in A Darker Shade of Magic. This is the first book in a duology, so I'm hoping that the second book doesn't disappoint me the way that A Darker Shade of Magic did. Some things that I liked better. Like I said, I liked the plot better in this one. I felt like it had some of the personal aspects that I wanted A Darker Shade of Magic to have with the main characters and the antagonists. I found the monsters to be super interesting, and the symbolism behind how they're created was so fascinating to me, and just thinking about it in our world and what it would be like if these kinds of monsters really existed. I liked the female main lead in this better than I liked the female main lead in A Darker Shade of Magic, even though they were similar in a lot of ways, but this one was just different enough that she had some qualities that the other one didn't, that I wanted the other one to have, and so I liked her a little bit better. I still didn't love her. She was still a little obnoxious to me, but I did like the male character a lot, and again, I really thought the world was interesting, and the direction the plot went was interesting, and I feel like the second book in this duology is probably going to be very good once I get around to it. Some things that I didn't love, again, I didn't love the main female character. I liked her better than Lila in A Darker Shade of Magic, but she wasn't, there were some things that kind of bothered me about her. And then there was one moment in the plot that I was frustrated because I felt like they were being kind of dumb. Like, there was this problem that needed to be solved, and I felt like they weren't really trying to solve it, and it drove me a little bit crazy. Then I also wish that they had added like 50 more pages to the middle so we could see them develop a friendship before all the action started a little bit more. I felt like that part was kind of rushed and very brief, and I felt like their friendship could have become a lot deeper than it did before all the craziness took place. And I felt like I wanted to see a little bit more of their interactions with their respective families than I got, especially the girl. I wanted to see a little bit more interaction between her and her father that I didn't get, but I still really enjoyed this story, and 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I have here The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. It was such a sweet children's classic. I'm so glad I finally got around to reading it. I really enjoyed the ending of this story when compared to the movie. I felt like the characters were able to achieve not only what they wanted, but more than what they wanted, and I was able to get a better concept of what happened to these characters after the book ends, which I really appreciated. Also, one thing I hate about the movie is the idea of waking up from a dream, and all of it was a dream and none of it was actually real, and this one doesn't do that. And so that made me really happy. One thing I will say that I appreciate more about the movie than this was that the Wicked Witch of the West played more of a role throughout the story, that she was constantly there watching them. In the movie and in this, it was very brief that we actually had experience with the Wicked Witch of the West, which again, I would have liked to see her throughout it a little bit more to up the creep factor, her scary factor. And so anyway, but I did give this 4 out of 5 stars. It was really good. Highly recommend it. If you're wanting to start reading classics and you're not sure where to start, definitely the children's classics like The Wizard of Oz, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland are really good places to start because they're a little easier to understand, and they're also just fun and whimsical, and we all know the stories. So yes. And the last book I read this month, I actually listened to on audiobook, and that is Now I Rise by Kiersten White. This is the second book in the And I Darken trilogy, which follows a gender-bent Vlad the Impaler through her experience of taking the throne of Vlahia and ruling and becoming as brutal as Vlad the Impaler became. And it is really interesting. I really enjoy it. We follow both Lada, the gender-bent Vlad the Impaler, and her brother Radu. It's a dual perspective. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed following Lotta's story and just her descent into, well, she's always been brutal, but allowing that brutality to really become who she is and direct what she does, but all, like, she doesn't kill for no reason, at least as of right now. I don't know if that will change in the third one, but she isn't brutal for no reason. When she's brutal, it's for very specific reasons, and it's very interesting to follow her thought process, because it's one of those things where you don't necessarily agree with all her actions, but you understand why she makes them. It's a little unsettling to feel like you understand where she's coming from, but it's also very interesting to understand, like, during this time period where it was kind of a case of kill or be killed, and it was like there were kings, but the lords that were beneath them really had all the power because they held the armies and everything. It's really interesting to think in terms of being in that situation and how you kind of have to make these really hard decisions in order to keep a kingdom together. And so I really enjoyed this. The primary reason why it's not a 5 out of 5 stars or even a 4.5 out of 5 stars is because the second perspective, Radu, I do not enjoy all that much. He's fine, but he's very, just the way he thinks kind of annoys me. And something that I felt like was fixed a little bit in the second installment, but not a ton compared to the first book, is that everybody calls Radu the nice one. He's the sweetheart, he's selfless and kind and loving, and Lotta is the selfish, hardened, brutal one. And well, Lotta is definitely more brutal than Radu, and Radu is definitely more of a sweetheart in some ways. I feel like every time I'm in Radu's head, he's constantly thinking about himself and his own struggles and his love interest. And that's all he really seems to care about. He has moments where he knows he should care about his sister, and he does to an extent, but he cares about himself and his love interest more, it feels like. And he's just very needy and clingy, and when you understand his backstory, you understand why he's that way, but it doesn't make it any less irritating. And I feel like Lotta is constantly thinking about all these people and how they're struggling, and she doesn't think of it in a way that's like, oh, like, I feel so bad for them, I'm gonna help them. It's more like I want them to learn how to help themselves and stop being pushovers kind of a thing, and which is brutal and intense, but also more selfless than the way Radu thinks. And so every time I switch to Radu's perspective, I just want to get out of it. Just feel like I'd so much rather read Lotta's story than Radu's, although Radu's side of the story is talking about events that are happening that are important to know about, and I like learning about those things that are going on. But I just don't like being in Radu's head. Like, there's a couple characters that are in that same area of the politics and everything that I'd so much rather read from their perspective. But it's fine. Radu started getting a little bit better, sort of. Not really. But, I don't know, maybe in the third one he'll redeem himself in my eyes. I really enjoyed this. It's definitely a slower plot. The second installment had a lot more action than the first one, but it is definitely slower because there's a lot of politics and having to be cunning rather than just fighting it out. So if you really don't like slower plots, maybe don't pick up this series, but if you're interested in the history, it's definitely very well researched, which makes it very interesting. So if you're interested in historical fiction and are curious to read like a gender-bent historical fiction, if you've never read that and want to see what it's like, definitely pick this one up. I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to finish off the trilogy hopefully soon. So yes. Alright, that is it for this video. Let me know down below what were some of your favorite books that you read in the month of January and what you are excited to read in February. I'd love to know, and be sure to like and subscribe to my channel if you are interested in seeing my videos. I post videos approximately once a week. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Bye!